Alright, we are continuing to check what people who have actually played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 think and feel about the game. And I personally think that this still could be an absolute massive success. This looks like a pure story-driven, on-rails experience of a vampire power fantasy story, and we do not have many of them. Now, sure, there are a couple of issues with this, but the fact that the traditional fans of the Bloodlines series want an open world experience where your decisions really matter, because this is not going to seemingly be that game in any case. This is going to be very, very narrow, very driven, very not open world. Very much your choices are not going to matter that much, except for a couple of probably. But I do think this is going to be potentially a great power fantasy. From everything that we have seen, from the combat, from the skills, I think the workings for that are absolutely there. And also, this could be a surprise, really good storyline, maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but it could be that. I think we have the setting necessary for a game that's going to be good. But, obviously the downsides are also there, so it is kind of a coin toss. One of the things that's definitely going to be hilarious is the fact that your character's name's Fire. You cannot change that. And Fire really enjoys announcing that he has entered the building, premises, or whatever. So that's going to be extremely, extremely cringe, obviously. But, whatever. I guess that's something I can live with if the story is actually good enough. Or maybe there's a reason why that actually does somehow magically make sense. Who knows? So I am still kind of excited for this. I think that we could be getting a game that's actually way better than we expect. We already have one in the fact that the Day 1 DLC, Toreador and Las Sombras being locked by a paywall is going to be re-evaluated or something like that. So we're going to see what happens there. Hopefully everything that should be in the game day one is going to be in the game day one.
Extra Life video, I'm going to be talking about my hands-on impressions with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. This is a game that we did a preview for earlier this year on the channel, and I think most people were either pessimistic about this game, considering the direction of it, or maybe cautiously optimistic about it at best. But not a ton of people were really
cautiously optimistic sounds exactly right.
Excited for this game, myself included. It's not one that I was like super looking forward to, and in fact I didn't really have plans to see it at Gamescom, but a friend of mine actually said she went and played it, and it was one of her favorite games of the show, which kind of caught me off guard. So I went over to the Paradox booth and decided to check it out, and I was really, really pleasantly surprised with what I saw so far. So let's get into it.
Look at this. Yeah, the combat seems good. Again, I want the vampire power fantasy, where you're blowing up like 10 meat puppets at a time with just the snap of your fingers. I want an experience like that, because every vampire game that we have, it's like, you're not really the predator per se. You're kind of powerful, but you need to be cautious and things like that.
So this game is being developed by the Chinese Room and Paradox Interactive. The Chinese Room is most notably popular for Still Wakes the Deep, if you've ever heard of that game. And
yes, and Still Wakes the Deep is, by the way, a really good game, if you did not know. The story is good, the writing's good, everything about the game is actually surprisingly really good. So, because this makes me actually really hopeful for the storyline to be good, because these guys do know how to make a linear story that's interesting, has, mysticy elements and things like that. They know how to create tension and whatnot. So, this is like the big saving grace here. If they did not have that, I would probably be dooming a lot on this game, but currently I think there's a reasonable coin toss shot that we get something good.
I know there is a bit of controversy around this game. Apparently there were 2 vampire clans that are supposedly locked behind DLC for this game. This is not something I was aware of when I saw the game, and obviously that's not something I'm thrilled about hearing about. But I did see that the Chinese Room responded that they're looking into this and potentially changing this before launch. So the outcry about that seems to have caused change there. We'll see if that gets sorted out. But this video isn't really about that. This video is simply about how does the game play and what is it like. So in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, you're playing as an elder vampire. This is drastically different than the first game where you played as a fledgling vampire, so you're much more strong.
Yeah, this is massive. Effectively, you start off theoretically already really pumped and strong. Typically, vampire games never do this. You know, you need to become powerful.
You're powerful, you have abilities already. And this is something that I learned almost instantly when playing the game. The first enemy I attacked, I punched him, he flew 30 feet into a wall and died instantly. And it completely caught me off guard. I felt strong and powerful from the very
That's
second
so
I started
nice.
playing the game, which was awesome.
Now, admittedly, that's 100% scripted. Make no mistake, boys, but still pretty good.
Not every enemy dies this way, of course, and not every enemy is that easy. But at least from what I played so far in Bloodlines 2, you know, the first 45 minutes or so of the game, it very much feels like a vampire power fantasy. That is to say, you can do some really, really OP things out the gate, and I expect this to just get more and more so as you play through the game. Like, you can almost fly from rooftop to rooftop, you can climb up the side of buildings, and you generally just kick butt in combat.
Again, I said this previously, I'll say it again. Prototype but vampire. Doesn't that sound absolutely awesome? I think that does. I think we are missing that vampire power fantasy game. And if this can do it, I would be very okay with it. Now, granted, there are, again, there's a bunch of things that I don't like. For example, this red line that you're supposed to follow like a nitwit. I'd rather much have like a, you know, thing on a compass, honestly, than this. Or maybe if you're a vampire, you can do some kind of thing where you send out a pulse that turns everything black and white for a moment and the line appears if you need it like that. You know, something like that would be cooler and more interactive, because I honestly hate the, oh, follow line like moron thing, okay? You can make it this a lot cooler. They still have time. Again, imagine some kind of pulse that made the screen like black and white just radiates from you, and then you see where you need to follow the thing, and it maybe lingers a little bit, and then you need to do it again. That would be so much more interactive and fun.
And Bloodlines 2 so far is one of those games that just makes you feel like a badass while you're playing, even from the very moment, and you don't want to stop because it just feels so damn good. And I will say that Bloodlines 2 has a bit of a noir feel to it for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's set in the city of Seattle, and the music that plays while you're making your
So, half the people that are gay.
Your way through the game and while fighting has a little bit of a rock noir feel to it. It's really hard to explain unless you've heard it, but it really sets the mood of the game. There's kind of a underlying detective feel there as you play, and as you play, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it really immersed me into the game world. It really made me want to like explore and investigate because of this. So kudos to the music and kind of the environment and setting. It really pulled me in instantly. And the other reason is that you're actually carrying another consciousness with you as you play through the game, and you're not quite sure why.
Is it me, or is this not even the first vampire game that does the second consciousness in you speaking to you thing? I think we have seen this. Theoretically, Cyberpunk 2077 is actually a story like this. So, I mean, people like that. So, again, there are reasons to be absolutely excited about this.
The reason for that is, you know, explained in the story, and I don't want to ruin that for anyone, but it turns out that you have basically another vampire in your head, and this guy is a private investigator from the 1920s. And your conversations that you'll have with him, you'll talk to him about things that have happened and kind of go back and forth with him, and you can build a reputation with him and things like that. But what I've been told is that eventually, as you progress through the game, when you're resting as your character, this private investigator vampire consciousness that's in your head will take over, and you'll actually get to see the city during the 1920s time period and play through like a completely different setting of Seattle. So this sounds really, really interesting, and obviously the 1920s is a big part of that noir feeling of the game. Another thing that I really thoroughly enjoyed while playing was the dialogue of the game. The voice acting is pretty solid from what I've seen so far, and the
True, but Luo is a little bit too fast.
Options for dialogue allow you to play really aggressively or passively, and you can see the reactions of your comments in real time, not only in the facial expressions of people on the screen, but also in text form. It kind of shows you like, this person will remember this, or this person viewed this positively, or this person was upset by it. I keep saying person, but you get the point. There's like a lot of nuance to it, and you can sort of see the reaction, so you can understand how things have went for you. And I think that's probably going to be good for replayability in the long term of the game, simply because you can see that this was positive or negative, and it's not always the expected result that you'd have. For instance, I had an interaction with one character where I was talking very, very aggressively to them, trying to intimidate them.
Okay, wait, let's look at the dialogue thing, because everyone who has footage of this has currently like Chinese Room send footage to you. And by the way, yes, Chinese Room, probably the worst name for a company you could ever pick, but whatever. So you need to answer. You are out of your depth. My apologies, we can resolve this. What is my crime? You there, upstart? Okay, this is already 100 billion times better, honestly, than anything you can expect from Outer Worlds 2. Okay.
I was talking very, very aggressively to them, trying to intimidate them. And that person respected me for it because this was like a brute force type character, kind of a bully guy. And the only thing
We do have a black vampire here, but you know, she does look hot.
that he really responded to was strength. So projecting strength was respected by him. And it actually turned out not getting into a fight with him, which I was almost certainly expecting from the way I was talking. And on top of that, there are 6 different bloodlines that you can choose from, each with their own skills and skill trees that impact the way that you play through the game, from dialogue to combat to traversal in the game world. And they have different skills and abilities, and it's not easy to pick which bloodline that you want. It's a very tough decision, and I think that's great because it really does impact the way that you're going to play through the game. In my case, I played the Bana Hukim, which are kind of like the judgment / execution bloodline, where they kind of assassinate people they deem to have done wrong and things like that. And one of the early abilities that I got was actually the ability to decapitate a weaker enemy instantly and just literally use your hand to slice their head off, which was kind of fucking awesome, frankly. And there are other abilities that you'll
again, Power Fantasy sounds pretty good.
gain. And something particularly interesting was that, like, when you
now, granted, from some of the attacks that you can say, like the this Chinese mumbo jumbo acupuncture BS, that does not look great, but they can improve it. I mean, it's not really hard to make this, a hit like this, even with your palm, feel a little bit more meaty, you know? So, that can be made better.
go through the
I mean, Avowed did a good job even at fixing it, so, I mean, it's not that hard,
bloodline
right?
selection of the game, it kind of tells you like how your experience is going to be. Like it doesn't spoil it for you or anything like that, but it's telling you like this is an easier bloodline to play, this is a harder one to master. And so not all bloodlines in the game are created equal from, difficulty of the game. You can play some of the other bloodlines, but you just have to recognize that it might be harder to get through certain points of the game because you have a different skill set that may not be applicable. For instance, if you pick a bloodline that's not notable for combat, you might have more difficulty in combat scenarios than you would maybe some of the other vampire bloodlines that excel at combat. And the exploration.
Okay, that's pre-sent footage, so I think that's actually real in-game footage, by the way. I mean, stuff like that's pretty cool.
The game, I didn't get to see a huge part of it because I was basically doing like the first quest of the game.
Again, imagine prototype scenario. You just land on the street, you snap your fingers in the shadows and pay like the 20 closest targets to you. That would be lit!
Kind of acclimates you to the game world in Seattle and things like that, and you're kind of following like a blood scent to an objective, and you're meeting up with somebody, and basically the first thing you're trying to do is establish yourself in Seattle and not get killed by the local vampires there. And you've been asleep for a very long time, and so you're not really familiar with the way the city operates, and you're trying to kind of like navigate that while you learn the mechanics of the game. So there's a lot of that at the beginning, but it feels really good when you're traversing. You can run really fast, you can run up walls, you can fly, basically not completely, but you can glide, and basically anywhere you can see so far it feels like you can go. So there's a lot you can do in exploration. You can just run up to random NPCs and kill them or attack them. And, if you blow your cover as a vampire, then bad things will happen. So you can't just do all these things openly in front of humans. And there's a little bit of that going on in the game as well. And I really, really enjoyed what I've seen so far. I think that's going to be a stellar element of the game. And the only real concern I have with the game so far is maybe the game's combat system, which seemed, at least for me, I was playing on one of the harder difficulties of the game. I don't think it was the hardest one, but it was like the second hardest one. There was like easy, normal, hard, and then like very freaking hard or whatever. And I was playing on the hard just to see.
The problem with difficulty. Oh, I actually am in front of him. Whoops. I guess that's fine. The problem with difficulty levels in games like this is, okay, if you put a crank up the difficulty, if it just increases damage taken and HP bars, that's not fun. Imagine difficult, but then again, it's like if you're trying to do a vampire power fantasy, and like this average peasant starts doing some kung fu mumbo jumbo against you and kills you, is that fun also? So increasing a difficulty level for a game like this is actually like ridiculously tedious and hard in a lot of cases, because just increasing health bars and damage that enemies do is kind of lame, and no one really likes that.
How it was, and combat is really fun, I will say, but it felt like even basic enemies were taking 4 or 5 hits compared to like the very beginning of the game where it was like things were dying really quick. It seemed like very quickly the enemies became more damage spongy, if you will. You can still assassinate enemies in one hit, so if you take like a stealthy approach, sometimes that doesn't really matter. But it did feel like on the harder difficulty, there was a bit of damage sponginess. And again, it was very early in the game. I had like one ability. You're going to get much more later on in the game that'll probably make combat go a lot faster. And I would imagine that, again, this is part of the bloodline selection, that there are certain bloodlines that just have more.
Again, how the bloodline selection is going to work, you're going to be able to pick what you are, and you're going to be able to level that easy, but you can level anything else from any other clan or whatever. And it's just going to be harder to level that stuff. That's how this is going to go. So, if you can max out anything, you're going to be a fucking beast.
Combat abilities that are going to make combat go faster. And, I was kind of in the middle area of those. So I imagine this may be different if you select a different bloodline, but I am a little bit worried that combat may get repetitive, at least on the harder difficulties, from how spongy those enemies were. And it's not something that I'm like super worried about because everything else was so good at the moment, but we'll just have to wait and see. And something I want to mention briefly before I wrap up this video too is that
So the combat being repetitive, we have already heard that, right? We heard it from, was it Mr. fucking May? I don't remember. But we have heard this, and I don't understand this complaint. Yeah, the combat is repetitive in literally any game you play. There's no exception to this. It doesn't matter what game you play, the combat is going to be 100% always repetitive. Fallout, Starfield, Lost Ark, it doesn't matter what you play. It's going to be repetitive. That's how combat works.
Know that this sequel is a huge departure from the original in terms of the way the game is designed, and there's going to be a certain amount of people out there that just don't like it because of that. And that's totally understandable, absolutely. I never really played Vampire the Masquerade, at least not to the degree that a lot of the fans of the series have played. So for me, this is kind of like a fresh entry for me. So I'm just kind of giving you my impressions from someone.
Well, this is going to be a completely new thing for a lot of people, I guess. Again, the big thing about this is probably the fact that everyone can easily agree that this should not be called Bloodlines 2. This should be just called Vampire the Masquerade Fire, or whatever the fuck you want to go with.
Who's never really played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade. I've never played the tabletop or anything like that. Even though I love tabletop games, it's just not something I'm super familiar with. So take that with a grain of salt. If you're a Vampire the Masquerade fan, you may have issues with the game simply because it departs so much from the original. But if you've never played the original, or you're somebody who's just curious about the game from everything you've heard online, I will say that it plays really, really well so far, and I'm actually pretty excited about the game for what it is. All in all, though, I really, really enjoyed the game.
Well, let's see how it goes. Again, I think this could be an easy dub. I think this could be an easy win. The studio behind this has a very recent, very good story game behind its back. So, again, I think there's a lot of reasons why this could be a success. I think it's a coin toss at the end of the day. Either this is going to be woefully lacking in everything, or this is going to be way more surprisingly better than people expect. I don't think it's going to be necessarily clear, obscure Expedition 33 levels, but it's going to be probably good. In any case, that was Fixed to the Life 10 out of 10. Bye!